All right. Thank you so much for joining us for the current state of education and the quality of life in Ukraine. My name is Dr. Jessie Hansen DeFusco. I am currently the president for the Harvard Alumni for Education, SIG, as well as assistant professor at Lawrence Technological University in Michigan. I want to say thank you so much to our guest speaker, and I will let our guest speaker introduce himself at this time. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Viktor Pozdniakov. I am Lieutenant Colonel of Ukrainian Police, veteran of National Police of Ukraine. I have currently a retired police officer. I have 26 years of the experience with the National Police of Ukraine, as well as the 8 years of international experience with UN in post-conflict countries like Liberia, Sudan, and South Sudan, where I was in different positions, including the commanding positions as well. I would like to say thank you also for this opportunity to talk with you, to share my knowledge, experience, and expertise with you. And I would like to say thank you to the American people, to the America, to the USA, for that support which has been provided to Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. All right. So these questions were generated actually by students and from Lawrence Technological University, as well as members of the Harvard alumni. And so I will present about 5 different questions and let you answer. If any of our audience has questions, please type them into the chat and we will try to address those at the end of this meeting. And the first question is, what is the current situation and quality of life in Ukraine over 3 years after the start of the full-scale Russian invasion?
Yes, the war affected a lot of, and the current situation is, I can say that it's not good for us, and unfortunately, it's not good for the Russians as well. It's like typical stalemate. Now the Russians, for the last year, they have offensed Ukraine, but gradually and with the big casualties. Now, if you see that there are some casualties of Russians, I will not say that they're very accurate, but they are very close to the British sources, because it's like 900,000 of the persons, and they're very close to the Trump when he told in the January that 700,000. You see that like it is. I would like to see that how it is a trend. It is for the 2022. It was total casualties were like 100,000, and for the 3 months, the last column it is for the 3 months last. It is now even more than it is for all last year. It is how they. No, my location is not hidden particularly. I'm right now in the west part of Ukraine, in the Rivne region. It is we have a border with Belarus, and it's not far from the capital. Yeah, I will also reply for the questions if they will appear, and if they will not interrogate with this, if they will not differ with this issue. Okay, now it is a. It could be next slide, please. Yeah, and it is now it is situation is we are not Ukraine is not in desperate position. We are managed to despite all these challenges, we managed to stabilize the front line. Now it is more or less the front line is stable. In some areas, even we counterattack. In some areas, Russians they're moving on, but it's not really big movement right now. It is like it was during the First World War in the West Front during 2016, 2018. Yeah, it is. And I'd like to say about the Kursk operation. It was a little bit quite successful because we kept one of the town in some area, like quite big area, Suja district in Russia for almost 7 months, and now you see that it was it is the current map of this how as the troops. It is the red line. It is the border between Ukraine and Russia. It is the area in blue. It is the area which is still kept in by Ukrainian forces, and area in red marked. It is the area which are already took by Russians. And if you see, like perhaps you can see that there are no any settlement of the Ukrainian troops there. Even we already, like a few days ago, we took some village in Belgorod region as well. Well, it is a front line also there. Good up. Yeah. Yeah, we have challenges with the front line because you see how long the border with Russia. It is like almost 2,500 kilometers. Okay, the active front line is like 1,000 kilometers more or less. There are another like 600-700 line with the Russian border between the Ukrainian and Russian regions border, and there are also border with Belarus. And in Belarus, it was also invasion started to the Kiev in the beginning of the war. And we are keeping the troops as there. Now we have like our army is about 1 million. It's a huge army in the world, yeah, but it's also a huge front line. And there are around more than 600,000 Russians already in Ukrainian land at the east and south of Ukraine. And if you see the distance, it is like between Warsaw and Barcelona. And if it is like compared to the America, it's like between the Chicago and Dallas. I just checked in artificial intelligence. Could we next slide?
Thank you.
Okay, like, now it is a full map of Ukraine. It is marked in red is there are Russian troops already, and the area in map, the area which occupied by Russian. It is, as you see, at the north, there are some green areas. There are areas which were taken by Russia and later on were liberated from Ukrainian armed forces. And also, you see that at the north, Russian troops in Belarus, we still need to keep the troops there, and at the east, and even at the west, near the Moldova, there are Russian-controlled area, Transnistria. There are also like Ukrainian troops. We are like almost surrounded by Russians, but not really. And it is our big challenges because the front line is really very big. Okay, like the war has been changed from the first year to now. And now, in the beginning, it was like typical war. Now we used more drones, more kamikaze drones. We produce our own drones, our own kamikaze drones, and Russian casualties from the kamikaze drones, no, from the drones, is around 40-45% of all using of all weapon. For example, for the last year, Ukraine produced 1,400,000 FPV drones only. Ukraine started to produce the long-range drones, and now it is the latest with the latest capabilities up to 3,000 kilometers. And the strikes from Ukrainian drones are quite effective. Like for the few days ago, we struck the Russian airfield in the Engels with the strategic aviation and with the missiles, which were during the loading reloading process, and we destroyed from 20 to 70 missiles, which one cost around $30 million US, and they were ready to send to Ukraine. It is just example. Also, our sea drones are very effective. We droned almost half of the Russian Black Sea fleet. They are now stuck in Russian port Novosibirsk. They keep there to avoid another droning. It actually changed the war, and it allowed us to open the corridor in Black Sea and to export our wheat and other our grain to the world.
Wonderful. So really the wars kind of evolved into a very long territory. You have a long border that you're trying to secure, you're pushing back, and it's escalated to more, drone warfare than in the beginning of the conflict.
Yeah, and just one more thing, one more remark. Also, like Ukraine is a quite developed country, and it is like we have the technology. Now it is our ballistic program, long range. We already the last hit was like 1,000 long range ballistic Neptune missile. It hit it exactly in Russian refinery plant. And last year we produced 100, and this year it's planned to be produced 3,000. No, and actually not a lot of like some Russian like international intercontinental missiles like SS-18 Saturn, they were produced in Ukraine, in Dnipro, for example. And now they cannot produce, and they cannot also maintain them because we stopped to do it for the last 10 years. It's just an example.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. The next question we have is, what is the current state of education for children and university students despite the war?
Of course, the war affected a lot of the study of the education also for the students in Ukraine. And of course, it differs from the cities too, because the west part is less affected, central part is it's more, and the front lines cities are much more. And we have like big cities like Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, which are like 30, 50 kilometers from the either border of Russia or from the front line. It is almost like the ballistic range for them, and the city effect is a lot of, like Kharkiv has like the distance from Kharkiv to the Russian border is around 40 kilometers. And before the war, the Kharkiv was the city in Ukraine with the biggest number of the universities in Ukraine. And there are a lot of students, there were a lot of students, and now it is, of course, they do sometimes offline, sometimes online. It depends on how the situation allows, but it also affects. Also, the continuously air alert, it affects, and going to the shelter back, it is everything is. So, yeah, now all our schools are equipped with shelters. And in the cities like Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Ukraine has built the underground schools. Of course, it's a little bit costly because our budget is limited, but in these areas, it is either they already built, but some of them already has been built.
So the schools are continuing, and the ones closest to the border, you talked about the cities that are about 25 miles, just to put it in for Americans, 25 miles from the, where the bombs are going off. That's within the, the strike range. Students are still going to school, but it's been disrupted. Universities, were targeted, and, online schooling is still available, but it is more limited than before, but still the system continues.
Yeah, and just one more thing, like it is also like online school is available, but Russian also like trying to hit our infrastructure and energy infrastructure. And if it is no energy, if there's no electricity, sometimes online is not available because it is also for the internet and all other facilities. It is like somehow it's working, somehow not. And one more thing I will tell about the university. Like my university, when I was studying for the master degree in the law, it was the East European University of Dali, and this university was twice relocated. First, he was relocated from Lugansk, very quickly evacuated to the Severodonetsk in 2014 due to the Russian area, and of course they lost a lot of their logistic and their equipment there. And in the beginning of the war, it was another relocation to the first to the Kamyanets-Podilsky and later on to the Kiev. And it was also like during the wartime, you cannot make a proper evacuation or relocation, and it's affected a lot of, and you do that with the students, of course. And for example, like I'm from Riona region, to my region was relocated another medical university, and it is the war affect universities as well.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's good to know because, it's one of these when war happens, in lower income countries, schools can be devastated. But in, middle income, higher income countries like Ukraine, it continues. But when there's strategic targeting of infrastructure, of telecommunications, it can be very expensive. It can have costs, but it does seem that Ukrainian children and students are continuing their education despite the hardships. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, our next question is, there were reports of how the war has affected children, like kidnappings. There's been maybe you could speak to how many children are believed to have been transported across the border into Russia, Bulgaria lines. There's been some violent attacks and then the trauma. You served in South Sudan, you served in Liberia, you worked in post-conflict situations with traumatized populations. Based on your expertise, what is the current concerns with children affected by the war in your country currently?
Children affected also like all other citizens, like in Ukraine, and children and women. They're like more vulnerable group of the society, and of course, like even like it's not. It is already everybody known fact that Russia stole already about, if I'm not mistaken, 30,000 of Ukrainian kids from the temporary occupied area at the south, and they adopted them somehow. I don't know how, but those children who were like without parents, or they were like taken, the parents left in the Ukraine, they took to Russia. Of course, it's like children like with the other Ukrainians, they affected from the war, especially from the in the areas where it is the front line, or also like where the strike, and there are also so many casualties among the kids, among the children. Like yesterday was the strike of the residential houses by missile in Sumy city, and I already checked. It was today 101 casualties, and 23 of them are children.
Three
Because
were
even
children.
even living in their homes, it might be some. It is definitely, it is anyway, it is a risk of be affected by the war. And like in Kiev, it is every night drone attacks, and our anti-air defense system works, but anyways, the debris from the drones are falling, and it's sometimes they are hitting the residential, and in regular basis there are casualties among the children, as well as other civilians.
Yeah, I mean, based on just that one estimate, it's anywhere from 10 to 25% of casualties are not soldiers. They're actually innocent civilians and children. So that is kind of a reflection of these new wars that we are currently undergoing, such as in Palestine, Hamas. Just the issue that women, men, children, people who do not have guns, who do not have training, who are not soldiers, are actually the biggest casualties of war at this point.
No, and also like this constant the air alarm, going to shelter, going back. It is also like affects the mental health as well as children because the strikes. Even like in my city, I remember when it was the missile strike for some infrastructure, and my son was seeing it, and he was like shocked and scared in the first time seeing, and later on there were drone attacks to the near his university in Lviv. One time, another time it was like a missile attack, and it was explosion near his dormitory, and half of the windows of in his dormitory got broken. And of course, for the children, it is definitely some stress.
Yes, and it's really important to point out, a large proportion of Ukrainians in the first days did flee. Many are returning, but many stayed, including with their families. And you served in Liberia, you served in South Sudan, and there's been enough studies that show the long-term mental health effects on children who witness and are affected by war. And that's going to be a huge policy need, is to provide psychosocial and mental health support for the children and for the youth that have essentially survived 3 years of war, along with their parents who've lost children, including families that have essentially had their children stolen. And they don't know, where they are currently. And you said roughly about 30,000. We don't really know the full number,
It
but
is a very minimum estimation. I believe it's much more.
and we pray for the reunification of those families. No, thank you. And you've mentioned your own son, so you're a dad. You understand that stress as a parent. And your family has stayed. Your family chose to stay in Ukraine as well. Well, thank you. Our next question was, there are reports of negotiations to end the war. I don't think there's anyone in the audience that hasn't at least seen a clip of when President Zelensky came to visit the United States and sat with the American President Donald Trump. And there's a lot of confusion about what's going on, a lot of feelings on both sides. But what is the current attitude of Ukrainians towards a peace deal with Russia?
Frankly speaking, we don't believe to Putin because his word costs nothing. It's my opinion. And also it is a good example. It is like first Chechenian war and second Chechenian war. Of course, the Russians, they need some like ceasefire to reinforce their troops, to replenish their stocks, to like with weapon and ammunition. But it's no any guarantee that it will not happen again. If and it will also depend on the condition, which condition, because now they want to reduce our army to ban our missile program, blah blah blah. But it really doesn't make sense because only our armed forces of Ukraine can defend Ukraine, not more, nothing more. It is already. Because it's experience since the beginning of the war, and Russia also claims that they include into their constitution for our regions, which they don't control at all of them, neither one of them. In like two capital of the regions, Zaporizhia and Kherson, are under our control, and Zaporizhia has never been a city. It's a big city. It's like 300,000 citizens. Has never been under the Russian control, and they still claim that it's supposed to be Russia. It's like it's. And of course, it is no. It depends a lot of which will be the condition of the final peace agreement. But my personal opinion, I don't see any chance that it will be happen very fast.
And one thing, just for those in the audience that may or may not be aware of the history, the long, struggle and the long partnership between Ukraine and Russia, when the USSR, the Soviet Union, was expanding in the 1930s, the early 1930s, Ukraine suffered a huge kind of issue with a massive famine, which has been compared to a genocide, the Holdor, in which millions of Ukrainians were starved to death. Ukraine being a huge producer of, wheat and food, it's really one of the food baskets of the world. The USSR took away most of the food produced during those years, leaving Ukrainians to suffer. And there's been a lot of research that shows the trauma and the resentment from that, the way that Ukraine was not treated the same as Russia at that time has carried on. After World War II, Ukraine kind of fell under the Iron Curtain or the Soviet bloc. It became its own independent country again with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But how do most Ukrainians feel about acquiescing some territory to Russians if a peace deal were to be brokered?
Yeah. No, actually, it is like about the conditions which will be taken. Of course, we're not happy, and if it is temporary occupied territory, it is one thing. But I don't think that it's possible even to say that okay, it's Russians, or because now these territories are included in our constitution, and we can and neither president or other delegation can remove and put and give to the Russia. It is a special procedure, and I don't see any chance it is to happen. About the history, we have like 100 years ago, we also had a war with Russia. In that time, unfortunately we lost our independence, but in that time we didn't have any support from anywhere because it's unfortunately, and we lost it. It was the 3 years war also. They managed to occupy all Ukraine, and this time they wanted to take all Ukraine. They were thinking to take it for the from 1 week to 2 weeks and to capture Kiev for 3 days. And no, and do you remember that all the analysts they told that Ukraine will fall in few days. But our army made a difference. About the famine, it was Ukraine was and is a breadbasket for the Europe and for the world. In 1932 or 1933, the Russians they organized the genocide of Ukrainian. They deprived all food from the villages because Ukraine was an agriculture country in that time, mostly 80%, maybe 70, 80%, definitely. And they took all villages. They didn't allow them to leave the villages. They took they put the troops everywhere. They didn't allow to get any food from anywhere. They took all food from them. And my grandmother told me because she survived. In the time she is from central part of Ukraine. She survived, and she told like in the village it was two set where no died in the time, and
Thanks.
from 1,800 only 300 survived. Yeah, it is. And they ate everything, whatever they could, some grass, some whatever it is, some frogs, just to survive. Fish, if they're lucky and the river was around, lake.
So there, for this reason, and the reason we bring this up is because, conflict often is not just something that happens overnight. It's, policies, histories of nations competing for resources, competing for territory, ideology, culture, and it goes back very far. And we bring this up just because we do know a lot of Americans don't always have the context of, the history between Russia and Ukraine over hundreds of years, but most recently in this last century. And with that going forward, that goes into our next and last question that was provided, which is what does Ukraine need currently to help end the war? Because I think we all know the quicker we can end the war, the better. But there seem to be, you seem to be hinting at some conditions that would make it almost very impossible for Ukrainian citizens to accept a peace deal unless certain conditions are met. What would be those conditions, and then how can the world help end this conflict?
Like we can, like what well can do for Ukraine. Of course, it is some support, like military. No, it's simple speak, it's military and financial support. But just to end the war, without our strong army, without reinforced army, or like even without international guarantees, but with our army, can guarantee that war will never happen again. I don't know which conditions will be applying for this negotiation or whatever, but our army and our economy, it is only one way just to keep the peace. Like now we are producing from 30 to 40% of the weapon, which is Ukraine using in as the front line with Russia, and we can, and our capacity is produce even double. Some European countries already invest in directly invest in our military, producing military factory just to produce in Ukraine. No, we, like as I told, we produce FPV drones, some missiles. We also like self artillery. Guns, self-propelled artillery guns, like 20 per month. It's already known as a figure. Yeah, with some of the military equipment and some military some military weapon we not produce, like for the missiles, for the patriots which defend our cities, or some like ATACMS, yeah, because it is this weapon can be also like for the defense and for the repulsive defense. And ATACMS also, like despite that our FPV drones, some our drones are very effective. ATACMS also very effective. Yesterday or day before yesterday, it was we hit 4 Russian helicopters in Belgorod region, 2 Mi-8 and 2 Ka-52, and they're not so many. It is also like how effective it is, like few strikes and they're over. It is.
And you formally worked for the United Nations for a very long time. You served training police in post-war conflicts. How to restart, how to police, how to establish justice in country. With your time in the United Nations, would you be able to speak to how the United Nations is responding to the conflict currently, and how the United Nations can support better Ukraine and essentially peace negotiations?
The main issue with the United Nations that Russia, it is a permanent member of the with the veto, and Russia will not support any include how to say Russia will not support or agree for any involvement of the UN at this stage without peace agreement. Right now, I don't see any possibilities for it. Perhaps after the signed peace agreement, yes, but not at this stage at all. Of course, the UN can support Ukraine with the humanitarian programs, with some other programs, but not with. They cannot guarantee any peace or any ceasefire right now.
And I think you bring up a very important part. Many people are aware of the United Nations and the role it plays in, trying to negotiate peace, provide humanitarian aid and world stability in a time when hegemonic powers are shifting. But you just pointed out that Russia is one of the top voting members. There are the five main voting members, and every time a proposal is brought for UN intervention, Russia votes this down, which does limit the United Nations role it can play in this issue.
Yeah, definitely. And one more thing, like what we can also like now Ukraine has the unique experience of the like of using with the full scale war with the second build army in the world. It's not the Russians are not some rebels. They're like huge, big, quite modern army, and we have a good knowledge how to fight against them, and we can share this knowledge also like with the Americans, with other our partners, because it would be also benefits for them, and it's not like only given, only taken. It might be we have a lot of quite big number of the resources. Ukrainians reach of them.
Wonderful. No, and again, this is a very complex conflict. This is, it's the first full-scale invasion in the 21st century, although there has been other incursions by Russia into Ukraine in the recent 2 decades. And it's not something that's easily solved. As we've seen, often in American media, it is portrayed that just one side needs to acquiesce. One president, whether Putin or Zelensky, needs to just say, okay, we'll stop the shooting. But it's much more complex than that. And I think thank you. I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're currently out away from your home and you're sharing your expertise with us. I did want to open it for one or two questions from the audience. Again, the questions that were presented were developed by students and members from the audience already, but if there are any additional, we do have it that everyone is muted just because we wanted to avoid any, slicing in of external entities. But if you do have any, please feel free to type them into the chat. We have one from Susan Finley, who says, a more immediate question is, what can we do as individuals to help the Ukrainian people and ensure our aid gets to the areas most in need?
Okay, like individuals, like you can send directly, particularly to the people. You can find somebody like in Ukraine if they need, or I think it is the best option. No, it depends on the aid, but there are so many people are like in relocated people from the east, from the front line, because the cities and towns are they're completely destroyed. And of course, it's or some like people who left without the accommodation, without the homes due to the Russian attack, or some injured people, and some of them really need in some need. I think that it's better to find somebody directly in Ukraine to this. I cannot. I don't want to promise anything. Just that I will find, but in case if really we can, I can assist in some cases as well.
I mean, I know for certain there are medical missions. Is UNICEF currently providing humanitarian assistance in Ukraine?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so donating to the World Food Program, UNICEF, there are top Charity Star rated nonprofits. You can also reach out. There are community groups on Facebook, and also just reaching out in general to politicians to express your views on the war and how your country should be supporting the efforts to broker a peace deal. Currently we're in a time where conflict is escalating around the world. Of course, we have the Israeli-Palestinian war, Ukraine and Russia, which now has expanded. We have reports that North Korean soldiers are currently engaged, Belarus. So these wars are extending. And so I think, I really appreciate, Suzanne, your question about how can we help people who are directly impacted, who are actually not fighters, people who are just kind of stuck right in the middle of the bullets, the bombs, the drone attacks. So thank you.
And just one more comment about this: the non-North Korean soldiers, they are here in Ukraine because the Russia also they're facing the lack of the soldiers because due to high casualties, and they recruited the prisoners. Now it is from North Korea, from the whatever from the world they recruit to the war.
Yes, so Russia has been, there have been reports that Russia has conscripted from prisons, has, brokered deals with other countries for sending their own military soldiers. So yes, this is expanding, which does, we do know that in the meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky, Trump said, we're on the precipice of World War III. But with that, it's also a country that doesn't want to lose its sovereignty, and a people that, as you showed in the beginning of this, in the beginning of this presentation, hundreds of thousands of people have died. And have placed their life on, essentially the altar of democratic freedom. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what would we do if it was our country? Would we be so easy to give away one or two of our states? If we were invaded, what would we do if we had lost family members, cities, and so I just really appreciate everything you've shared. And I know that you dedicated your whole career. When I met you in Liberia, you were dedicating, you're away from your family, serving in the United Nations, really to help countries recover from war. And then you went home to enjoy your later life, your retirement, and now you are actively a part of the resistance to fight for your country. So I want to say thank you again for everything you've done. And please, if anyone has any further questions, you can contact the Harvard Alumni for Education through our website. And I want to say thank you again to Viktor and to our wonderful audience for the questions that you prepared for today.
Thank you very much. Also, from my side, thank you very much for you, for audience, and for all American people, and for America for that support, that aid that you provided for Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Thank you.
Thank you so much.